During a flight, a 7-year-old boy made a strange hand sign that caught the attention of a vigilant stewardess. Concerned, she discreetly dialed the emergency number. As the plane landed, airport security rushed to the scene. Then this happened. But before we start, make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. "What's up?" Betty's colleague asked her. Betty gasped. "Oh, you startled me," she said while smiling. "It's nothing. I just zoned out for a second." "It's time to give out drinks. Are you coming?" her colleague asked. Betty nodded and followed her to the galley. She asked if they could be the ones handing out drinks in aisle 2, which was the one where the boy was sitting. Sadly, 2 other colleagues had already begun handing out drinks in that aisle, so Betty could only observe from a distance. She watched how the woman next to the boy handled the situation. She ordered a glass of wine for herself and an apple juice for the boy, meaning they did, in fact, belong together. But the feeling something wasn't right didn't seem to fade. He looked scared and almost unsure of the situation. Betty knew she had to do something to help him. They were on a 13-hour flight, so time wasn't an issue, but she had to be discreet about it. She decided to go to the boy as soon as she finished handing out drinks. She made up an excuse in advance just in case her colleagues would start asking questions. She had to wait until the woman would go to the bathroom again so that she could speak with the boy in private. After an hour of waiting, it was finally time. As soon as the woman stepped into the bathroom, Betty sprang into action. She took a deep breath and walked toward the boy as if nothing was wrong. The closer she got, the more she noticed that the boy was making the strange hand gestures. It seemed like he was trying to indicate something with the gestures, but Betty couldn't place what exactly. As soon as the boy saw her, his eyes widened in shock, and he quickly looked out the window again. "Hi there," Betty began. "I have a nice coloring book for you if you'd like." But the boy gave no kick. He didn't even look at Betty. Knowing she didn't have much time, Betty looked at the lavatory. She placed the coloring book on the tray in front of the boy and placed the pencils on top. "I'm in the back if you need any help with anything." She watched as the woman got back to her seat and instantly noticed the coloring books. Betty sighed. Her plan had failed. She had hoped to win over the boy's trust with the gift she brought, but the boy didn't even acknowledge her. Betty knew she couldn't do this on her own. "What's going on, Betty?" a colleague suddenly asked. It was as if she had read Betty's mind. "You seem a bit distracted." Betty sighed. "I need to tell you something." Betty told Joanne, her colleague, everything. She told her about the strange signs, how he only does it when the woman is away, how scared and confused he looks. After Betty was done, Joanne sighed. "This all sounds very strange to me. Why don't you just ask the woman herself?" Betty looked at the ground. She actually hadn't even thought about that. Her mind had instantly jumped into detective mode, probably because of all the movies she watched during her breaks. "But the woman would, of course, deny anything is wrong, Joanne," she eventually said. Joanne slowly began to nod. "Yeah, you're probably right." Suddenly, the boy began to scream. Betty and Joan quickly rushed over and saw how the boy was trying to get out of the grasp of the woman. "Let him go!" Betty yelled. The mother looked back at Betty with wide eyes. "He's fine, just a little scared of the noise coming from the engine," the woman said, trying to calm down the situation. But something in Betty didn't believe a single word the woman said. She quickly walked back to the galley and discreetly dialed the emergency number of the airport they were headed to. She told them to be ready to board the plane as soon as they'd land. There was no way she would let that woman get off the plane with the boy. With the journey nearing its end, Betty prepped the cabin for landing with an added sense of urgency. "Stay alert and follow my lead," she instructed her colleagues under the guise of standard procedure. As the aircraft's wheels brushed the runway, Betty's voice cut through the cabin's relief at landing. "Please remain seated with your belts fastened." The aircraft door opened, and police officers stepped in with a purpose that rippled through the cabin. Their entrance, assertive and silent, turned every head, a wave of reactions flowing through the aisles. The passengers, already steeped in suspense, now watched the unfolding scene with bated breath. The officers moved down the aisle with a clear target. Their steps were measured, their focus unyielding as they approached the boy and his guardian. As the officers reached the row, their interaction with the woman and the boy was tense, observed by dozens of curious eyes. The woman's protests filled the cabin, her voice tinged with confusion and fear. The crew, led by Betty, exchanged glances, a thread of doubt weaving through their confidence. The boy, silent and wide-eyed, was gently ushered from his seat by an officer, his small hand enveloped in the assurance of safety. The woman's protests became a fading echo as they moved toward the exit. In the confines of the airport terminal, the woman, flustered yet determined, presented her identification. Her voice steadied as she explained the boy's hand signals, each gesture a part of a language developed in therapy. The police officers scrutinized the documents, their expressions shifting from suspicion to consideration. The ID confirmed her relationship with the boy, adding a layer of complexity to the unfolding narrative. As the woman spoke, her narrative began to reshape the officer's understanding. She wasn't the boy's mother, but his aunt, and the distress signals Betty observed were, in fact, therapeutic exercises. The revelation was a twist in the tale that had gripped the entire flight crew. The aunt detailed the boy's fear of flying, an anxiety that gripped him tightly during the flight. He uses these hand gestures to self-soothe, she explained, demonstrating the motions. The officers listened, the pieces of the puzzle fitting together to reveal a story not of danger, but of a child's struggle with fear. The boy, now calmer, spoke in soft tones, corroborating his aunt's explanation. His words were hesitant but clear, his expression one of relief as he expressed his feelings. The situation, once tense with the suspicion of danger, transitioned into a moment of empathy and understanding. Betty stood a short distance away, her heart sinking as the truth unfolded. The realization that her well-intentioned actions were based on a misinterpretation hit her hard. She acknowledged her error silently, understanding the implications of her assumptions. The weight of her mistake was palpable, a sobering reminder of the fine line between cautious intervention and unwarranted alarm. It was a bittersweet moment, one that tempered her embarrassment with the solace that her intentions, though misguided, had stemmed from a place of care. In the quiet aftermath, Betty reflected on the events. She pondered the delicate balance between vigilance and overreaction. The line, she realized, was thin and easily blurred by concern. Her role demanded discernment, a skill she vowed to sharpen. Betty felt the weight of her responsibility heavily. Her desire to protect had inadvertently led to a dramatic situation. In the quiet of the emptying cabin, Betty took a moment to absorb the lessons of the day. She committed to balancing her innate concern with a clearer perspective, understanding that her actions, no matter how well-intentioned, had consequences. In a secluded corner of the airport, the boy, now free from the cocoon of the crowded plane, began to relax. His aunt, a figure of comfort, wrapped him in a gentle embrace, whispering words of reassurance. The tension that had once knotted his features eased, replaced by the faint traces of a relieved smile. In this quiet space, the turmoil of the flight started to fade. The aunt, with a gracious nod towards Betty, acknowledged the stewardess's intentions. Her gesture, warm and understanding, bridged the gap created by misunderstanding. "Thank you for looking out for him," she said, her voice tinged with gratitude. In that simple expression of thanks, the air of confrontation dissolved, leaving a shared sentiment of relief and goodwill. Betty returned to her role with a deepened sense of purpose. Her stride through the aisles was now informed by the day's events, each step a blend of her innate compassion and newfound wisdom. The experience, though challenging, enriched her understanding of the complexities of care and vigilance, fortifying her commitment to her duties in the skies. With the incident behind her, Betty looked forward to her future flights with a refreshed perspective. The lessons of the day were etched in her approach, a balance of concern and discernment now guiding her actions. She understood that each passenger carried their own story, and her role was not just to serve, but to understand and adapt to the myriad human experiences that accompanied them.